You know Omaha Beach ended in a foothold. What is easier to miss is how close that foothold came to not forming at all. For part of D-Day morning, men offshore could see smoke, surf, wrecked craft, and bodies on the tide line. What they could not clearly see was whether the assault was opening the beach or being stopped on it. Omaha did not nearly stall because of one famous blunder. It nearly stalled because several smaller failures hit at the same time. On paper, the sequence was simple: bombardment, then tanks and engineers, then infantry through the exits before the defenders recovered. Before many Americans even reached the sand, that sequence was already breaking down. The sea was rough. Landing craft drifted and came in off target. Units mixed together. Men expecting familiar officers or neighboring companies often landed with strangers. In a plan built on timing and coordination, that was a serious problem. Then the bombardment fell short of what the landing needed. Precise effects vary by sector and by account, but the larger result is clear. Key German positions were still able to fire when the ramps dropped. That changes everything. Omaha was not just chaotic. Several layers of support arrived weakened, delayed, or incomplete. The clearest example was the armor. The duplex drive tanks were meant to reach the beach early and give infantry immediate fire support. At Omaha, rough seas were disastrous for many of them. A large number sank before reaching shore. Others were landed closer in rather than launched far offshore. Historians differ on exact totals, but not on the consequence. Many infantrymen hit one of the most dangerous beaches of D-Day with far less armored help than planned. Then came the engineers. Their job was essential: clear obstacles and open lanes under fire. At Omaha, that work became brutally exposed. Engineer teams took heavy losses. Some gaps were created, but fewer and more slowly than the timetable required. So the view from offshore was deeply uncertain. Smoke and dust hid parts of the shoreline. Radio reports were fragmentary. In places, the assault looked pinned to the waterline. And this is where hindsight tricks us. Because we know D-Day succeeded, it is tempting to treat Omaha as terrible but inevitable. It was not. If the exits had remained sealed much longer, and if German strongpoints had kept control of the bluffs and draws, the American sector could have faced a far more serious crisis. Not necessarily the collapse of the whole invasion by itself, but a dangerous rupture in it. So what changed? Not one speech, not one perfect order, not one miracle. What changed was that the original plan had failed in too many places, and surviving men began solving the problem locally. Scattered groups of infantry, engineers, and officers started finding dead ground, folds in the terrain, and gaps between strongpoints. Some used the shingle for cover. Some pushed toward the draws. Others climbed the bluffs where the defense was thinner than it looked from below. These actions were often disconnected. That is exactly why they matter. Omaha began to move again, not through one clean breakthrough, but through many small ones. Every machine gun position suppressed, every wire gap crossed, every path found up the slope reduced pressure on the beach below. At the same time, some tanks that did survive to reach shore added direct fire where they could. Naval gunfire also became more effective as ships, including destroyers, moved in dangerously close to engage visible strongpoints with better accuracy. That part needs caution too. Naval fire did not suddenly win Omaha in one dramatic blast. But closer support helped blunt positions that had been tearing the landing apart. It bought time. And on that beach, time was everything. Now the battle looks different. From offshore, Omaha had seemed frozen. On the ground, it was changing shape. Slowly, unevenly, but measurably. The beach was no longer only a trap. In several places, it was becoming a base for small penetrations inland. That is the hinge of the story. Once troops got off the open sand and onto the bluffs, German positions began losing the clean firing angles that had made the beach so deadly. Strong points built to fire down onto trapped men were now being approached from the flanks and, in some cases, from the rear. The defenders were still dangerous. They were no longer controlling every part of the fight. By late morning and into the afternoon, the beach had widened. Progress inland remained difficult. Losses were severe. Confusion never fully vanished, but the landing had crossed the critical line between being pinned on the shoreline and forcing openings beyond it. That is why Omaha matters as more than a story of courage under fire. It shows how battles nearly fail, not from one dramatic mistake, but from multiple smaller breakdowns piling up together. And it shows how they recover, not from one miracle, but from scattered men, partial support, and local decisions gradually changing the geometry of the battlefield. Omaha did not hold because the original script worked. It held because, after that script broke, enough people improvised fast enough to force the beach open piece by piece. And that may be the most unsettling part of the story. History remembers the foothold, but for hours what existed was not victory. It was a narrowing chance.